What if I told you that there is a secret that can transform your life, free you from excess and give you a happiness that money does not buy? You wake up tired, you run, buying things you don't need, and yet the void continues, the feeling of being stuck in a gear that never stops. Henry David Thoreau discovered how to live with little and feel more. In this video, I will take you in this philosophy, show what he has learned in the loneliness of a lake, and how you can apply today to change everything. Before you continue, check it out if you already clicked the subscribe button. Yes, this video will disappear in 13 seconds. Click now and find out the secret that can free you. Have you ever felt that life runs too fast? And that, deep down, isn't that what you were born for? It was like that with me. Any afternoon surrounded by the noise of notifications, rows of supermarket, and the constant tinnitus of the highways, I realized that I was living like a passenger distracted on a train I never chose to board. I lived in a medium-sized city inside Pennsylvania. Aligned houses, impeccable lawns, identical mailboxes, but something bothered me. That feeling that everyone was running in circles, spending more to live less, smiling to hide a tiredness that didn't disappear. That night, by chance, I found an old book in a second-hand bookstore. The already faded cover was named Henry David Thoreau. I opened it to chance, and I read a phrase that burned me inside. I went to the forest because I wanted to live deliberately. Deliberately, that word pursued me like an invisible echo. I started to imagine what it would be like if I also fled the gear, not to escape the world, but to find out what was outside of it. The call came weeks later, on a fog morning. A friend invited me to spend a few days at his cabin on the banks of a lake hidden in Maine. He said I needed to hear the silence to understand what was wrong. I laughed on time, but accepted. When I arrived, I felt like the air was another. The trees, raised as green cathedrals, kept a kind of secret that the city could never offer. The lake was standing, mirroring the sky as if it wanted to reveal something, but not right away. It was there on the first night that I realized, perhaps living with little was not lost, but I won. Perhaps the true abundance was made of space to breathe, time to think, and the freedom to need no more than the essential. Have you ever felt you love more than you are loved? Or who are stuck in relationships that seem to suck more than they offer? The truth is that many of us enter love carrying expectations, illusions, and wounds, and we ended up repeating the same mistakes. I have prepared a free ebook with philosophical teachings that can change the way you love and are loved. They are deep but simple ideas that have already turned lives and can save their story before you donate more. The link is fixed in the comments. Download now before this opportunity disappears, and before you repeat the next error. And then, as the moon climbed and the crickets played its invisible concert, I heard the whisper. It didn't come from anyone but from the landscape itself, as if Thoreau were sitting next to me, repeating softly, "You don't need more, you need less." But what that really meant, I was still about to find out. I woke up before the sun. It wasn't the alarm clock, that invisible tyrant of modern life, who pulled me out of dreams, but the singing of a bird I couldn't name. The light was still bluish, and the air so cold that it seemed to cross the skin to touch the soul straight. My friend's cabin was simple. Aged wood smell, a small table and a swing chair that rangs from each movement. There was no television. There was no Wi-Fi. My cell phone, forgotten in a corner, now seemed like a strange, almost obsolete object. I made coffee in a crumpled kettle, and the steam climbed as if he wanted to join the fog of the lake. I sat on the porch and stared at the water. Nothing happened. And at the same time, everything happened. Each ripple was a phrase written by the wind. Each reflex of the rising sun was a reminder that beauty doesn't have to cost anything. It was there that I realized an uncomfortable truth. Maybe I had never, in fact, stayed alone with myself. In the city, loneliness is full of noises, horns, ads, people running. Here it was a silence that did not intimidate, but invited. I began to remember Thoreau living in Walden Pond, cultivating beans and recording the passing of stations like those who write down sacred secrets. I thought, could I do the same? Reduce life to a minimum and thus expand it to the fullest. As the sun rose, a squirrel appeared running through the rolling of the balcony. He looked at me with distrust, as if I asked what I was doing in his territory. I smiled. It was a small but true date, and maybe that was what I was missing. Unchecked meetings, not filtered, not sold. The coffee cooled in the mug, but I didn't want to move. I felt that it breathed too deep, would break the spell that morning. That's when I realized something that made me shiver. Life had not diminished there. It had become greater, and deep down, I already knew. The first morning of silence had changed something in me that would not come back to what it was before. On the second morning, I decided to do something I had been avoiding for years, an honest inventory of my life, not from the bank, of the soul. I took a forgotten hardcover notebook on the shelf and wrote at the top of the first page, "What do I really need?" The question was shining like a headlight on paper. I breathed. I started. I listed objects that followed me as shadows. 3 jackets I hardly use, the collection of mugs bought on fast trips, cables I don't know what they serve, books I bought to look smarter, signatures that discreetly devour the credit card every month. In the corner of the page I wrote, "Soul cost." It was a new calculation, invisible in any spreadsheet. I thought of storage units that multiply through the highways of America, warehouses full of dust-wrapped memories, as if longing could be rented per month. I thought of the lines of Black Friday, people running with huge televisions, as if, inside them, there was a better promise of life. I remembered the nights when I rolled my cell phone, mesmerized by offers that seemed to know me better than me. Who was buying who? Thoreau spoke of simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. I wrote the word 3 times in the notebook and felt a light tremor in my hand, as if I were signing a silent agreement. What if I made a vote? Not a religious vote, but an intimate pact, reducing even necessary until necessary. I opened my backpack and sprung all over the table. An extra T-shirt, a knife of pocket, a notebook, a pen, wallet, cell phone off, an old photograph of my mother on a New Jersey beach, smiling like who owes nothing to the future. Was there a life there? The question came back, slow, dangerous. I washed the coffee mug and heard the wood ranger under my feet. Outside the cabin, a thin wind passed between the pine trees like fingers turning invisible pages. There, nature did not ask for permission to be. It did not compete, just it was. And if I paid attention, I would start to be. I grabbed a cardboard box, those of supermarket, and started to put inside the no more sense objects. Everything had a weight that was not physical. Each farewell released a cubic inch of breathing. When I finished, the box seemed less than my relief, so I wrote another question. What do you have? The silence answered first, then a memory. The day I accepted a job only for the promise of an annual bonus. The time I got stuck in the I-95 traffic for hours, returning from a mall that promised me happiness in 12 installments. The moment I realized that I worked to pay the life that work required. In the last line I wrote down, "The machine wants a hurry, life wants presence." I closed the notebook. I left. The lake was in a blue so deep that it seemed to want to swallow me. Not to drown, but to return me. And for the first time I felt that the secret was not to add, but to subtract until the joy was visible like a stone in the background of water. That's when I heard steps on the trail behind the cabin. It was not my friend. It was someone I didn't expect to find there, carrying a question that would change everything. "Do you really believe you can live with so little?" The voice came before the face. I stopped. I smiled. And I understood that the inventory of the essential was just beginning. He emerged from the fog like a figure that the forest had invented. Canvas pants spent, boots with dry mud, a wool coat that looked older than him. He carried a small, almost empty backpack. His eyes, of a gray that resembled wet stone, examined me but who recognizes a visitor not only of space, but otherwise to live. "I saw you noting things in the notebook," he said, with a difficult-to-locate accent. "Making the list of what you need?" I nodded, not knowing how he could have seen it since I had been alone on the porch. "More or less that." "An instinct," I added, "trying to understand what's left when I take the excess." He smiled, a slow, almost complicit smile. "So you're doing the right job. But beware. The forest returns answers we don't always want." We were silent for a few seconds. The wind moved on the branches. The lake breathed in short waves. I felt as if the scenario is listening to the conversation. "Do you live here?" I grunt. "I live where I'm not dragged." He looked at the horizon. "And in recent years, this has been the only place that doesn't try to buy me." I was intrigued. "And you? Are there a lot? I mean, things, possessions?" He laughed. But it wasn't a light laugh. "I just carry what I can leave without warning. The rest would leave me anyway." I didn't know how to answer. There was a strange force in his simplicity, almost offensive to the mindset I had grown with. Accumulate, protect, expand. He introduced himself only as Isaac. He said he went by every season to see if the lake was still alive. I didn't understand if I was talking about water or something deeper. Before going, he handed me a small cloth package. Don't open it now. Open when you feel you are ready to leave something behind. And it disappeared on the trail, so quietly that it seemed to have dissolved in the cold morning air. I returned into the cabin with the package in my hands. The cloth was rough, smelled of firewood smoke. I landed it on the table, but I didn't have the courage to open. There was something there, yes, but the real weight seemed to be choosing when it faces its content. While the afternoon fell, I realized that the day had not been about what I took from my life, but about what came into her without an invitation, and I felt that Isaac, whoever it was, had left more than an object, had left a puzzle. That night, when I lie down, I thought of Thoreau's phrase, "The price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it," and I wondered, what would I be willing to change for what was inside that cloth? Sleep came slowly but brought a vivid dream. I walked down an empty road with just one backpack, and each time I took something out of it, the world became clearer. I woke up before seeing what was left. The package was still there, silent, waiting. The next morning, I woke up with the package still at the table. The light crossed the window and fell on it as if he wanted to report it. I made coffee, but every sip was accompanied by an involuntary look at that rough cloth. It was small, fit in the palm of his hand. Still, it seemed to take up more space than any cabin furniture. It wasn't what was inside. That was what I projected on him. I remembered when, in town, I received a package that I waited for weeks. Inside there was only any gadget bought on the impulse at dawn. That day I realized that part of our lives is moved not for what we need, but by the excitement of expecting something we believe will transform us, but almost never transforms. I looked at Isaac's package and realized what held me was not curiosity but fear. Fear that the content would be banal and thus destroy the mystery. Fear that it was too deep and forced me to change. I put the cloth in my pocket and went out to walk along the lake. The fog was beginning to dissipate, revealing a mirrored surface where clouds passed like silent boats. I walked to a point where the stones formed a small peninsula. I sat there, listening only to the water beating against the rocks. It was then that I saw, floating on the surface, a dry sheet. It turned slowly, taken by the breeze. It didn't fight the movement, just followed. And I realized, perhaps living with little was just that. Letting out the invisible weight, trust the chain. I took the package in my pocket and for a moment almost threw it into the water. But it was not time. I went back to the cabin and wrote in the notebook, "The real weight of things is not in them, but what they demand from us to be kept." The phrase seemed to come from outside, as if the lake had whispered. I spent the rest of the day cutting wood and watching squirrels by storing nuts for winter. It was a simple and direct survival choreography. None of them accumulated by vanity or anxiety. They did only the necessary. When the night arrived, the wind brought a sharper cold. I lit the fireplace and stared at the flames dancing. At some point, I realized that I was not thinking of opening the package. He had ceased to be an urgent mystery and became a silent reminder. Sometimes it is not the answer that matters, but the willingness to carry it until we are ready. Before bed, I put the cloth under the pillow. I wanted to see if he invaded my dreams again. In the dark, I could almost hear Isaac's voice. "When you drop the last weight, you will find that the rest is light." And suddenly, I realized that perhaps the object within that cloth was nothing, and that this, paradoxically, could be everything. On the third day, I woke up thinking about the city. Not as longing, but as who remembers a dream you have just woke up. The wide streets, the light plates, the constant traffic in the interstate. Everything seemed distant, almost fictitious. And yet, it was there that my life happened until a few days ago. I remembered the routine. Wake up before the sun, swallow a calf. It is hurrying, running for a job that paid the bills, but devoured my energy. Fast lunches at network restaurants, superficial elevator conversations, endless tasks that never exhausted. It was a script that was repeated as a movie no one asked to watch, but everyone was still seeing. Here on the lake, time had another texture. The clock was not the pointer, but the change of light in the trees, the direction of the wind, the corner of a different bird in the late afternoon. It was as if every moment you had room to be noticed, and I realized, in the city, time was not passing. It was consumed. I took the notebook and wrote, The problem is not the price of things but the cost of life they ask for in return. The lyrics were slower, as if I was learning to write again. I spent the morning walking down a trail that served around the lake. I found a clearing where the grass was wrinkled, as if someone had slept there. I touched the floor and was still warm. I felt a strange connection with this invisible presence. Someone who, like me, might have decided to escape the gear. The air was impregnated with a smell of pine mixed with damp land. At one point on the trail, I saw an old wooden plate almost hidden by vegetation. Return path. The arrow pointed away from the lake towards a narrow road. On instinct, I followed a few meters and stopped. I felt that if he continued, he would return to the world he was trying to unlear, and it wasn't ready. I returned to the cabin before sunset. Isaac did not appear that day, but the package was still under my pillow as a patient secret. In the fireplace, the fire crackled, throwing small sparks that climbed and disappeared. I kept thinking that maybe our lives were like this, moments that shine and go out, and that the mistake is trying to arrest them in pots, as if they were going to last forever. As the wind hit the walls, I realized that something was changing in me. The desire to possess was giving way to the desire to belong, not to things but something bigger, silent and vast like the lake. I closed my eyes. For the first time, I didn't think about coming back. On the fourth day, I made a simple vote. 24 hours without getting anything. No shopping, no clicks, no just this time. A fast, not food, but the superfluous that surrounded me like a mist. I turned off my cell phone, put the wallet in a drawer, and left the cabin key on the table, as if returning a symbol of possession to the world. I went out to the trail with a water bottle and the notebook. The air had the cold morning metal flavor. The wet leaves stuck to the boot and made a light sound as a paper turning. With each step I wondered, what do you still believe in me? You need more? A crow followed me for a few minutes, landing from branch to branch, like a severe inspector. I laughed alone by imagining that he, free from all our financial comedies, watched me to see if I cheated. In the clearing the day before, I sat and opened the notebook. I wrote 3 columns: have, do, be. In the first I wrote down shirt, book, pocket knife, mug. In the second, cut wood, walk, write, listen. In the third, it took me a long time. The verbs were too large, too heavy. I scribbled free, present, whole, and I noticed the discomfort. Being was not on the list. It was a direction, not an item. In the late morning, I went down a dirt road and found a makeshift fair. 2 pickup trucks, 1 apple stand, 1 of honey, coffee served in a crumpled metal teapot. A hand-painted poster said, cash only. I approached, and the saleswoman, a lady in a red coat and hands of those who know the winter, offered an apple with a smile. It's sweet as September, he said. I wanted to accept, but I remembered the vote. I explained, a little embarrassed. She laughed. So take it anyway. Sometimes life pays the bill. The apple weighed in my hands like a parable. I bit. It was sweet, yes, not sugar, but from ground. I came back down the road with my sticky fingers and a strange lightness. The fasting of the superfluous took me nothing. Returned. The silence, attention, the sweetness of the apple of grace. It was then that I understood. The opposite of buying is not to renounce, is to realize. In the afternoon, I stuck old receipts that were still in the wallet. Gasoline, dinners, delivery fee, invisible monthly fees. I put them in a metal bowl and lit a match. The flames licked the numbers lines and disappeared in light, almost cheerful. I was looking at the rest as who follows a polite farewell. I don't miss you. Isaac appeared when the smoke was already crumbling in the air. I saw your economic fire, he murmured. Burned what? The installments of my distraction, I said. He watched me carefully, like the wind before the canoe. Tomorrow, before sunrise, open the package. If you try before, it will look like a trick. Open later. The lake loses what it wants to tell you. And what does he mean? I asked. Isaac pointed to the water, almost still. That sometimes the whole way fits in a pocket, but you only find out after walking. That night I lay early. The package, again under the pillow, looked like a different heartbeat from mine. The fire of the fireplace died without haste. With each crack of wood, I thought of everything I once called mine, and actually dragged me as anchor. I closed my eyes. The fast was over, and in the dark I felt a clear flash, almost audible. Tomorrow something will come out of me, not the cabin. I slept with the feeling that the world was breathing for me. The cold of dawn woke me up before the first light touched the lake. I got up, lit the lamp, and took the package. The rough cloth seemed softer than before, perhaps for the amount of nights he slept under my pillow. I sat on the porch, the breath forming small clouds in the air, and I waited for the sun like a starting sign. Isaac was not there, but his presence seemed spread between the pine trees, in the slow sound of the water, in the silence that surrounded me like a cloak. When the first golden strip cut the horizon, I began to undo the knot. My fingers were firm, without the anxiety of the early days. I deceived the cloth slowly, as one who reads an old letter. Inside, there was only a stone, gray, smooth, oval, fit perfectly in the palm of my hand. No registration, no apparent secret. I held her and felt a light warm, coming more from me than hers. I looked at the lake, and for a moment I felt angry. From Isaac, myself, to have expected so much for something so banal. But as I observed the stone, I realized that she had no edges. It was simple, whole, complete without needing anything but itself. At that moment I understood. The package was not about the object, but about the time I spent carrying it, imagining what was inside, living with the possibility of the mystery. He had taught me to wait, to slow down, to find meaning in the apparent void. I stayed there for minutes, maybe hours, turning the stone between my fingers. Each lap seemed to sand some internal roughness that I didn't even know I had. I remembered all the things I accumulated in my life, hoping that they would fill a space that, in fact, only silence could occupy. I got up and walked to the stone peninsula where days before I had seen the dry leaf float. I held the stone over the water. It could throw it and see the circles spread, but I didn't play. I put it in my pocket. I wanted to carry this light weight a little more. Upon returning to the cabin, I realized that something had changed in the air. It was not the climate, but my own perception. Everything seemed clearer, as if the world had undergone invisible polishing. In the notebook I wrote, "Some things weigh less when we understand that they don't have to change to have value." I closed the cover, kept the notebook, and for the first time since I arrived, felt that the city no longer called me. What pulled me now was the lake, and maybe Isaac. The next day, Isaac appeared early, sitting on the edge of the lake as if he had spent the night there. "Did you open it?" he asked, without turning his face. "Yes, it was just a stone." He laughed softly, as who hears an inner joke. "There is not only, when the thing is whole, the stone is the condensed lake, the water molded, the weather polished. She is everything and nothing, like what's left of us when we leave the excess behind." I sat next to him and we looked at the reflection of the sky. The stone was in my pocket, heated by the body. I did not need to show it. Isaac knew I carried her. "What do I do with her now?" I asked. "Same as it does with life. Do not hold stronger than necessary." The wind lifted small waves, and for a moment it seemed to move at the same pace. We, the lake, the clouds. Isaac then got up. "It's time to go," he said. "Where?" "Where simplicity is not escape but choose." He disappeared down the trail, and this time I didn't try to follow him. I went back to the cabin, sat at the table, and wrote in the notebook, "The secret of living with little is not to bear the lack, but to feel that nothing is missing." I closed the notebook and went out to the porch. The morning sun illuminated the lake like liquid gold. The stone was still in his pocket, but no longer weighed. I knew that one day I would leave her somewhere for someone else to find, and perhaps carry until he learned the same one I learned. While watching the twinkling reflex, I realized that the circle was closed. I had arrived there looking for answers, and would leave bringing better questions. The rest, the lake would keep. If you felt this change inside, click the screen now and continue this journey. The next chapter awaits you. The Hidden Secret of Magical and Simple Life with Thoreau.